We're going to talk about integration of Samsung SmartThings and .NET a little bit. But I want to talk about Samsung SmartThings and basically the point and kind of a high-level overview of how it all works first. The technology that, wrong browser. The technology behind all this is very network dependent. And so we've got, I'm really rolling the dice on whether I can keep this working right now. We've got Matt's cell phone with a hotspot that these guys are connected to. Going to use a cell connection here. This is connected to local Wi-Fi for that and this. I'm going to remote desktop to my machine at home that the hub is actually connected to. So if this works, it'll be a miracle. So yeah, well, I'm just going to leave it in this view. So I've been playing with, I bought a house about, a year and a half ago, and the guy that lived there had ADT security system in it. And he had switched from the ADT to Cox. And when he did that, it came with this control panel that used, I believe it was Z-Wave devices. Might have been something else, but I think it was Z-Wave devices for some of the devices, and it integrated it all together. And when he sold the house, he left all that stuff behind because he had no use for it. I wasn't going to pay Cox or ADT a monthly fee for that, and so I started looking at it and saying, what could I do with this? And obviously there's a million SmartThings out there, so I started looking at different devices, and I bought a Samsung SmartThings and absolutely hated it and took it back, and then later I came and bought it again because it's probably the best out there, well, at the time. So I've been playing with it just out of sheer personal interest, but my main driving goal is I want to have the hardwired home security box that came with my house integrated in with the Samsung SmartThings so that I can have a consistent, cohesive home automation, home security system. And all these things are talking back and forth. In doing so, I found out that programming for Samsung SmartThing is all done online in Groovy, and I hated that. I'm a .NET guy, and so that's where this started with, is me playing around with that. And I'll let you know right now what I'm going to show you tonight. I'm going to throw away as soon as I get home, and I'm going to start over because I found a much better way to do this. So my name's Eric Peters. I worked with Matt at Sogeti for a while. I've recently started a new venture. I'm working for a startup called SportSense out of my basement. The company's in Nashville. It's kind of fun. But that's enough about me. So Samsung SmartThings. Samsung SmartThing is a smart home hub. It's a physical device that you go by and you slap it on your LAN. And what it does is it provides a set of cloud-based services and a development environment and an interface to a variety of different technologies that it will integrate together. And it gives you some really basic tools to interact with these devices and do some automation and linking. So the development environment, as I mentioned, is all in Groovy. And Groovy is a very JavaScript-y type language. It's pretty simple. It's not hard to understand if you've done any C# or JavaScript or TypeScript. But it's a web-based environment. It's kind of clunky in my opinion. Debugging is primarily done through print statements. Not my kind of development. So with Samsung's, there is a lot you can do. You can do your home control, where 6 o'clock or at sunset, your lights come on. You can have remote controls to turn on different things. Pretty basic stuff for home control, home automation. Home automation is more of the smart home control. So instead of just having a remote that turns things on and off, you can have For instance, my garage door, if it's left open for 10 minutes, we've had a bunch of thefts in our neighborhood, people just walking into people's garages and stealing stuff. So if my garage door is open for more than 10 minutes, it will blink a light in the house to let us visibly know. It'll send a text to my phone to, tell me it's open, and I can go shut it, or I can shut it through my phone through the home control thing. And another aspect is home security, but the Samsung SmartThings by itself doesn't really have a really solid home security piece. They're working on it, but it's pretty immature in comparison to the ADT or Cox systems that that most houses that have security have. As far as devices, there are a million SmartThings devices, and I don't remember what it was. I looked up the numbers of the Christmas sales. It's something like 18 million smart hubs between Samsung and Google were sold over Christmas alone. Everybody's buying and selling these devices right now. I brought in a few just to show, but this power strip here is from a company called AOTech. They have a whole suite of Z-Wave products. And this key fob here it has 4 buttons on it. So by itself, it's just a tiny little device. It's actually a hub, and exactly the same, well, not exactly the same at all. It's similar to the Samsung SmartThings. I can hook up 8 devices to this thing and control them all with this. Using Z-Wave. It's pretty cool. I mean, if I, whoa, home automation right there. So, but that's just one company. There's a ton of companies that do this, but you got outlets and switches and lights, and I mean, there's just a sample of stuff on there. Cameras. I've got thermostats, my garage door openers, window sensors, the door sensors. I mean, there's all over. My sump pumps are hooked up to Samsung SmartThings, so if my sump pump triggers in the middle of the night, I'll get a text on my phone upstairs. Not triggers, but if the overflow triggers. Lots and lots of stuff that you can get. But with that, there's also a lot of companies fighting for it. And so there's a lot of competing technologies. Samsung SmartThings has done a fairly good job of covering Z-Wave and Zigbee just out of the box. Those are all local network things. It's basically the old X10 devices, and on steroids. It's all your local. They're passing the signals around in a mesh, and it stays within your house, and it's nice and local. With that, it's quick. So just like I hit the button there and it immediately turned on. That was Z-Wave immediately talking. But then you have other devices like a lot of the light bulbs are Wi-Fi. These switches here, they're Wi-Fi. And so there, they are communicating with something external and coming back into the hub. And you can get a lot more devices a lot more cheaply. You don't have the Z-Wave and Zigbee licensing fees, but there's that round trip cost and time. And so the whole garage door thing I was saying, it flashes a light. It's a Wi-Fi light, so the garage door will be open. It'll be like 30 seconds before my light blinks and lets me know that it's open. But I put just a really quick sample list of the smart tools, the top smart tools that I was able to find. And we've got every major player that you can think of. Amazon, Apple, Samsung, Google, they're all there. But you've also got all these little companies. There's one called Nexia and Hook and Lutron making light switches, Kwikset making door locks, Sylvania doing light bulbs, and pretty much nothing else. Everybody, I mean, Chamberlain, they do garage door openers, and they're making smart devices. Everybody's making smart devices right now. So all the different competing technologies, Samsung's trying to consolidate, and so their architecture is a mess. They try to make it pretty, but it's still a big mess of stuff going on. I'm not even going to touch on any of this, really. I'm just going to show you some of the basics, but there's a lot more richness to their architecture than what I'll come any place close to. I'm really a novice in all this, so it's So to actually program with SmartThings, Samsung way is you go to their website, and you start coding Groovy. They have some nice GitHub integration, and the main benefit out of the GitHub integration is there's a lot of people out there that have developed packages for different things. My garage door openers are from the ADT system that the guy that originally had the house had. And they use Zigbee, and they have a proprietary little sensor to tell whether the door is open or closed that communicates only with this box, and then that box uses Zigbee to communicate with SmartThings, but SmartThings didn't understand the communication between those two. There was a guy who put a package out on GitHub that automation.
You make it stand up?
But there's a guy out there who was able to reverse engineer that particular controller and write some Groovy script to make it integrate with Samsung SmartThings. And so I was able to just download it, plug it in, and go. So that was a big win, but there are a ton of them out there that are absolutely terrible. And I suppose that comes with anything open source, but it's surprising. The quality to miss ratio is pretty poor when it comes to looking at the public community provided GitHub repositories for SmartThings. So I'm going way too fast. I've got a bit of a demo, and I'm going to start out really small, but the main thing I want to show here is kind of the different components and how they work together, and how we're going to get to how I'm going to get to integrating my home security system in the end. I can't demo that, obviously. So the main developer page is right here. This is what they consider a great IDE. You have a My Locations, which is basically each physical smart hub device that you buy. I have two. I've got the one that I have for my home, and then I've got the one that picked up on Craigslist for $20 to use for the demo. So as you see, that gives you a lot of information about it. You can list all sorts of stuff. No big deal. You can list all the devices that you have. This is the stuff I have in my house. And then you have these smart apps. This is the main. Well, the smart app is how you interface with the Samsung SmartThings application. And I suppose this is a good time to show you that. And then they have device handlers, which interface the smart apps to the actual devices. So I found this app today. I have no idea if it's any good, so I hope this works. It's a little Chrome thing called Visor, V-Y-S-O-R, and it allows me to remote control my phone on here. So I'm hoping that is going to work right. Oh, and it gives ads every once in a while. So, so if anybody wants Guns of Glory, little promo. So this is the Samsung app that you get to control the SmartThings device. Basically, you can have, it's one app, so you can control multiple devices with the one app. And once you're in it, that's it. They don't have any user level. They say manage users, but everybody's an admin. And so if you have, like, it's me and my wife and two daughters, I want to be the only admin because the three of them don't know anything about technology and will screw this up. But they can. So if I give them access, if I want them to be able to see the cameras, then they have to also have the access to delete the cameras. And so I'm not happy about that aspect of it, but the main dashboard has a piece that kind of alludes to their smart home monitor, which is they changed it since I was here last. Yeah. All right, they changed it, so I'm not going to step through that. But that's basically what they're working toward. They're working toward the home security piece as well. But you can put some devices here in your favorites. I just reconfigured when I came in here, so all my devices are not there. I had them there before. And I basically just have hooked up these 3 switches into the demo device. So, as I said, the networking here is kind of crazy. These things are going through Matt's phone over Wi-Fi, and I'm connected here to my hub at home. And so I'm hoping this is going to work. And it did. So very simply, they come on and off like that. Pretty fancy. They also have a lot of features that they aren't going to show on here, but those devices actually do power monitoring, so you can hook into the APIs and read, how much power is being pulled from that. So if you're worrying about, your electric bill, you can have a bunch of devices that, if you're worried about your electric bill, you're not going to pay $50 for a plug, but but you can. You can group these devices up into rooms and be able to control them. And then you can have scenes which provide you the basic automation. The scenes are pretty rough cut automation, but there's some really, you can have things like I'm going to bed, and you can have your home kick into the, monitor your doors, make sure they stay closed and all the lights are off and things like that. You can do some pretty coarse cut things like that. It works.
Very cool. It integrate with like Z-Wave or Zigbee or those kinds of devices, just like with hard wires?
So no, that's why I'm doing this, is because I want to get to that integration point. You can through code, but the main technologies that they support right now are Z-Wave, Zigbee, and Wi-Fi devices, Wi-Fi connected devices. The Wi-Fi connected devices is there's a real big asterisk by that, because the Wi-Fi connected devices are normally connected through their vendor's website. For instance, these guys here, and these guys are, I have a love-hate relationship with them. They're kind of big and bulky and a pain in the butt to use, but I got them on Amazon over Christmas for $5 a piece. And you can't touch that price anywhere. So, but to use them, I have to go into this Kasa app. And through the Kasa app, I register the device over Wi-Fi, which is a really tricky thing because you have to have your phone hooked up to the Wi-Fi that you want that to use, and then you start a sync process, and then you hook up to that Wi-Fi to communicate that information, and then disconnect, and then it uses the same Wi-Fi as your phone to go up to the Kasa website, and then from the Kasa website, you register the device and name it, and you can interact with it. Then in Samsung SmartThings, you have to go into your smart apps, and you have to get the Kasa TP link connect, which you saw unofficial on there. This is a community provided thing, and you put your credentials into the Kasa website, and then there's a connection made on there. So every Wi-Fi device is that same process, but it opens up Wi-Fi's cheaper. And it opens up a just enormous number of other devices. Anything beyond those 3 technologies, they have Bluetooth in the device itself, but it's not turned on, so you can't use it yet. But clearly it's they're given a hint as to where they're going. But anything other than that, you have to write code to do, typically in Groovy. So to write code. So what I wanted to do here is I wanted to create just a simple web service interface that could talk to a .NET application that I write. And so I hosted my .NET application here, and any smart app that you write has a URL that you can get back into it from your .NET application. So my application can call back into that. That's how their smart app goes into the code that you use. So as you see, it looks very JavaScripty. There's a lot of stuff in here. And over here, I mentioned 2 references. First one is the API reference. In general, the smart apps and the device handlers all are very similar, and there's a ton of information on here about how to interact with them. But these different sections all give different capabilities for different types of smart apps, but this capabilities reference is what I think is really the interesting piece. Every device has one or more capabilities, and they moved the documentation since I linked it. Awesome. So every device will have one or more capabilities. The capabilities can be things like acceleration sensor. It can, tell you whether I don't know anything about the acceleration sensor, but tell you if you're accelerating, I guess. Let me see here we go. These guys I'm using as switches. So I'll just go straight to the switch. So they have the attributes which you can read. So you can basically go in here to any device that has the switch capability, and you can find what the state is. And it's either on or off. It also will have commands, to switch on or off. So normally your device isn't going to have just one capability. It's going to have a boatload. This, as I said, those have power monitoring in there. There's going to be power source, power meter. That's probably what it is. And so you can get a number, and I don't know exactly. Oh, here we go. Representing the current power consumption. And each device will probably have a different unit of measure or something. But and so you plug a device in, and SmartThings can query what capabilities are on that device, and you can then interact with it through these APIs. But this list over here is your list of all the different capabilities, and as you can see, it's pretty staggering how many there are. That's where the complexity of the programming comes in. There's some really cool stuff in here, though. I mean, TV channel, ultraviolet index, really. Lots of good stuff. So if we look at, wrong code. Great, awesome. Thanks, wife. Lost my place. Where am I? Here we go. So if you look at this, what I was trying to do is I'm trying to get everything. I want all the sensors. And so I listed out all the sensors in here. And in theory, I could handle every signal that comes through SmartThings by listening to all of those. I'm sorry, not sensors, all those capabilities.
These are all capabilities for the sensors you have in your house?
No, these are all the capabilities that Samsung SmartThings supports. With the exception of 3, and I can't remember what they are, but they didn't follow the same API, and so when I tried to run it, it would crash. So I deleted them. I don't even remember what they were. Actually, I do know one. One was power meter, which kind of ironic. But and as you'll see in a minute, I only actually use like 2 right now. So the rest of these those up there are just very initial. Oh, here we go. Here's the ones that I commented out. Buttons, which I think this is buttons, but I didn't dig into it enough to know. Energy meters and power meters. Those 3 I couldn't get to work. So I basically define I'm going to use these capabilities, and then here I'm hooking those capabilities up to different event handlers. And you'll notice that I have them all going to this generic event. So the generic event, it simply goes and it gets some information about the event, and then it calls out to my web API URL, passes the information I care about into it. So that right there is 80% of what I wanted. That is every event for a device hooked up to my Samsung SmartThing hub. I listen to it through this, and then it sends the message to .NET. So pretty simple.
You don't have any devices that are hooked up to your hub that support the capabilities, just getting more.
Yeah.
Never send that in.
Yeah, you'll never see it. Yep. So the other side is I want the .NET side to be able to call back into SmartThings and interact with it. And so that's where these mappings come in. You're basically defining routes and parameters for those routes, and then defining how you want to handle that. This is, as I said, I'm going to throw this out. This is the part I'm going to throw out. There's, just on this basic example, I've got 3 routes for every single capability in the system. And I only included switch and motion sensor here. So the amount of code would become quite large and groovy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to generalize that part right there and just have it be a hash lookup so that I don't have multiple. So basically I will, in .NET, tell Samsung SmartThings what to do rather than coming over here and writing 150 lines of routes and then the functions to support them.
Those routes, those are defined on the smart things that your .NET would call the smart things, right?
So there's 2 modes that the Samsung SmartThings works in. There's a local and a remote. The local, none of this applies. Okay, so the local is when you have 2 Z-Wave devices on your LAN and you went into the app and said, I'm going to do this home automation. The app has something that I don't think I have access to through their development environment, but it has a way of sending that to the device itself. And so when you get that going on, it stays local and it never hits this end of the code. When you start doing this, and when I'm listening to those devices, I'll still hear messages from those devices, but it won't, that's all running in the cloud. And so the remote aspects of Samsung SmartThings, it'll take these messages, fire it up to the cloud, see if there's anything listening, and then do whatever it is supposed to do. And so most of this here is just doing some very basic events. So when I call into this update with the command toggle, it's going to look at the current value of the switch. If it's on, it's going to turn it off, otherwise turn it on. This is the line right here that made me realize I don't need any of this in Groovy. You can send an arbitrary string into Groovy and execute it. And so I could do all this logic in .NET and just send in Groovy, not Groovy, but SmartThings API calls from .NET and just have them execute it. And so that's why I'm going to go down a different path. So the one good thing that this Groovy editor has is they have a nice handy little simulator. And you can pick your, and I'm absolutely baffled why they call this a simulator, because it integrates in with the app running on your phone. It integrates with the hub at your house, and all the devices you have registered show up. And so I don't know why they call it a simulator, other than the fact that when you pick your location, all of these capabilities that you defined as I'm going to use these, it puts them in this list and it creates a dummy object, so you can test objects that you don't have actual devices for. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use these 3 switches that are sitting right here. And so using this simulator, that screen is really annoying. I can go in and I can say install the simulator, and it gives me just a really simplistic UI. I have no idea why it doubles these up. It doesn't make any sense to me, but you click the simulator and it clicks the light on and off. Pretty fancy. So, Samsung SmartThings right there.
That's running through your hub
No.
at home?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's running through my hub. But it's, so I have these guys registered via Wi-Fi through your phone to Casa. Then I have Casa installed on the SmartThings app on my phone that allowed me to register those with my demo hub that's sitting at my house. And so I click this button in the Samsung Cloud, and the hub at the house realizes that it's the remote device, and it sends a message to these guys through Casa to turn on.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
Yeah, it is.
30 seconds.
And I'll tell you what, it doesn't go this quick at my house either. So it must be my network.
That's fine.
Huh? It's Matt's phone, yeah. You probably got more bandwidth than I do at my house. All right, so that's the Samsung side of things. So the .NET side, a simple example here is just this hard, right? Yeah, I'm hiding a lot of complexity, which I'm gonna save until the end if anybody's interested, because it's actually pretty boring. But if I start this up, this is the web server that I referenced in the Groovy code. And I referenced it in the Groovy code only because I was using it through the simulator. One of the steps that I just glossed over was install, I think, or I can't remember I think it's install. But since it's a smart app, is that what they call it? Smart app? I'm terrible with terminology. Okay. It blocked me out here. Yeah, the smart apps. Since it's a smart app, you actually install it on your device, and when you do that, you can define boxes, and it will store the information in those text boxes on your account. And so, I coded it here because I'm using it in the simulator. But when you use it on your phone, you can put it in there and customize it, and it's really straightforward and simple to do that. But this is the website that I referred to, and all I've done here is I registered my SmartThings device, and what that's effectively doing is going to my web config and taking these GUIDs, which the simulator, well, a combination of the smart app and the simulator assigned to me, and gave me an identifier that I can use, and then the different URLs that I need to hit to interact with it, and it creates a web connection to that and says, hey, this is who I am. Other than that, I have a switch that I look up by name. I have 3 switches I look up by name, and when they're on or off, I just do a debug write line to say they're on or off. Super simple home automation. And so if I come in here and I go to my smart app, I hit demo switch 1 on, the light comes on, and it says switch 1 on. The thing that just baffles me is how well all of this stuff ties together. Especially if I put it on the screen so you can see it too. But the demo switch 1 that read the status here, and this is the Samsung SmartThings app for my phone, and it still interacts with there, and back over here it said switch 1 off. So really basic, really simple. The code behind all of this there's a core piece that's kind of complicated, but the actual devices, I'm modeled off of that API documentation that I showed earlier, and I have attributes and I have commands. And so the attributes that they supported were an on attribute and an off attribute, and I just define those up here, and that's the syntax that Samsung expects, is the device name and the attribute name. And then I could find a better way of doing this, but I have the attribute mapped to the callback function, which is an event up here, and that's what you were seeing in the main function right here. On the command side, it's just a send command. Now all of the details of this, it's all HTTP details. So it's just forming the right query string to send up there. And so it's ugly, not fun to look at, but it's really straightforward, especially after you get it done once. So printing on and off to the screen is not something that's interesting. So here's a little example of an automation demo. I texted Matt at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. I'm like, oh my God, I just broke everything. I didn't fix it. It's still broken. I was playing with 2 switches, and then my wife got tired of this one taking up the entire outlet because it's got 1 plug on it and the outlet has 2, and you can only use 1 of the 2 outlets. And so she took it off and put it on my desk. And so I was like, hey, I'll use the 3rd one. And so I plug in the 3rd one, and I started adding it, and all I did was extend the demo to have 3 switches instead of 2. And it's kind of funny. So my demo of the home automation is going to be really simple. You turn on a light, the other light goes off. You turn off a light, the other light comes on. So that it's going to ensure that there's always 1 light on in the room. Kind of dumb, not really practical, but when I add 3 lights, it got kind of fun. I'll show you that here in a second. So as you can see in the code, if I turn my device 1 on, it'll turn off device 2 and device 3. So you turn a switch on, and I do the same thing for all 3 switches. You turn a light on, and it turns the other 2 off. So it's like, I just want 1 light on. But if you turn the light off, then it will turn on 1 of the other 2 randomly. So it's basically a home automation that is saying, I want 1 light and only 1 light on at any given time. So what I didn't think about is with 2, you have a known alternative. But when you, I need to make sure, since I stopped it and restarted it, make sure everything connected up. And this log here will show errors from, the connectivity between the 2. And so it's, that's where you print if you want to debug. Anyway, so now I turn 1 off, it's going to randomly turn on 1 of the others. But since that one turned off, it's going to turn off some of the others. So if I turn 2 on, now it's confused. So the lesson learned is the events will trigger other events. And so I need to do a little bit of state management in here to make sure that it works right. But it's
Ended up in a correct state.
eventually, well, it's random. Well, I turned it off, so. Yeah, it's randomly picking which one to turn on. So if it randomly picks 2 of the same, there's only 1. It's good. Yeah. So I sweat over this for 15 minutes, and then I was like, eh. Oh, she'd love that, yeah. Yeah, I've been talking about getting, we've got under cabinet lighting in the kitchen, and it's these halogens, and they generate so much heat you can toast bread by putting it on the counter. But she never uses them because of that, but she really wants them to work. And so I've been telling her I'm going to get some they have this strip lighting, this LED strip lighting that you can get, and I'm going to get some of that and put it up there and hook it up to SmartThings. And she's been really tolerant with me automating everything in the house, which is wonderful, until she throws too big of a switch on my desk. But I've been telling her that I'm going to get that. Well, I've been looking at it, and they have these strip lights that are full color spectrum compatible. So I'm gonna get some of that and put it in there and have it white. And then someday when she's in there, I'm gonna have it just start randomly shifting colors all over the place. And yeah, I love it. All right, so the next piece I want to show is the next piece. I there isn't much to demo, but I kind of wanted to show where my thinking was with tying it into the home security piece. Talk about that a little bit. But this is a good point for me to stop and just see if you guys want me to dig deeper into the code, or if you have any questions, or if there's anything.
Can you do the font, please?
Oh, I totally apologize. Hey, it's great on my screen. So. So yeah, as I was saying, this is where I am hooking up to the devices in the first place. And so when I created the devices and registered them through Casa, I named them Demo Switch 1, Demo Switch 2, and Demo Switch 3. So it's really what that constructor does is it calls out to the Samsung's Groovy code, and it passes in switch, since it's a switch object, and it says switch/list. And so then it queries Samsung SmartThings and gets back a list of all the switches that are registered with the system, which is just these 3.
Is this code that you wrote, the SmartThings lib?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But as I said, it's really simple. This is the switch. So it has the attributes and the events, and the base class is effectively just, the bulk of it is just HTTP calls. Going out, using those things from the web.config to connect up, authorize itself, and then it goes to see, is this device type, does all devices have it? If not, then it does the command list, which is, device type /list. And that's the Groovy code over here with those routes. Is this, I'm not sure if I can really increase this without screwing up their UI. But basically that comes in and it hits, I'm sorry, it's not /list, it's just /switch, and that does the list command. And the list command is actually a built-in function, part of their API. You just say collect, and it'll return a list of all the objects that are in the system by type.
So is Samsung's cloud translating your HTTP request to other protocols for these devices? Are they smart enough to speak HTTP? Or?
So that architecture piece that I showed you that had 50 pieces all touching together, this is the highest level piece. It's like 5 or 6 layers abstract from the devices themselves. So the devices hook up to the SmartThings hub using the protocols, but anything that you do to interact with them has nothing to do with protocol. My code doesn't know whether it's local, doesn't know if it's remote, doesn't know if it's...
It can't talk to your garage door opener or whatever it is?
It can, but it does it through those capabilities.
But I mean directly?
But not directly, correct. Yeah, so the garage door opener has a sensor that can tell you whether the door's open or closed, and it has a proprietary, it's not even directly connected to the hub, but it has a proprietary communication back to the box, and then the box uses Zigbee, I think, to communicate to the hub. And so, all of that information, all the different capabilities is abstracted out for me. And all I do is I come up here and I register a line saying I want garage door controls. And then in that generic handler, I do whatever it is I want to do to the garage door control. And what I can do is based on that capability documentation, where it would give me attributes that I can query and commands that I can execute. And other than the 3 I commented out, they're all completely that simple to interface to. It's a set of attributes, a set of commands.
What's the security on this? So you said authorization, but it looks like the authorization is just code.
It is.
So,
It is. They
I mean, is that as
issue.
open-ended as it sounds?
There's auth strings.
They what?
There's auth strings.
Yeah, yeah.
Auth stuff.
It's OAuth stuff, but it's not as rich as OAuth makes. You know, OAuth has a lot of different capabilities that are much richer in what they support. It's basically a client ID that you pass in, a client ID and client secret.
Right.
So
You have an app ID and a secret.
yeah, and I can't remember exactly where I got those, but when you build your smart app, it will step you through a process, and one of those processes is here's your credentials, keep it secret, and you take that. When you run the simulator,
Show it in a presentation.
don't you? Yeah, exactly.
They're quiz though, so.
If your lights start turning on and off in the middle of the night, you know.
Yeah. When you do the simulator, you have a separate token and endpoint here that you connect to for the simulator, and that's what I'm doing right now is going through those two. But to connect to my account at all, that uses OAuth, and there's a security token in with that. So
So the events you wired up, that you're listing on, if one of those events triggers, it'll call your API, correct?
yep.
Okay. Let's say you got green lights and you got the event wired up for light coming on. When it triggers your API, is it going to send over information about that specific light?
Yes, absolutely.
And if that light has one or two more actions, let's say it takes temperature and senses acceleration for some reason, will that data come with it,
No.
or that'll come in separate events?
I actually don't. You actually don't have device-specific information. What you have is capability-specific information. Now, I haven't researched this enough, but there is a device ID that comes in with that information, and I believe that the capabilities of the same device all have the same device ID, but I haven't validated that yet.
Let's say you have a signal coming in and a light comes on, then your program, your application can send back and say, okay, what's the temperature of this device?
I believe that's the case. Well, that's not what I wanted. I have somewhere in here. There we go. So I didn't get every piece of metadata that I could from the communications on the Groovy side, but I got the stuff that I thought was most relevant. And so if I go in, and I trigger on the devices so it starts going chaotic, you'll see that with each of the messages that comes through, and is there really no zoom on this window? Matt, you use Visual Studio. Does the output window have a zoom?
I don't know.
All right. Well, which you can't do while I'm debugging. All right, so basically what was coming through there was, the messages, the handlers that I had written, but the message that came in was giving me the name and the device ID and the stream ID, which is the device type, and then the value. So there's probably other metadata that I didn't dig into. That's all I needed for where I was going. But I believe that what you're saying is accurate, that the device ID is consistent across multiple different capabilities.
I don't know, your devices have different IDs here.
Yeah.
Demo
the events that you wired up, those are all fired and responded to by your app, right? I don't believe, like, those actually have switches on them, right? If you turn those on and off.
Yeah.
It will fire them.
That's the one thing that drives me crazy. If you come up here and you hit this switch, nothing happens. It doesn't fire the events when you use these switches by
Your app
themselves.
would have to pull to see if
Yep.
they change.
Well,
Does the app actually know that the switch is off, or does
It
just
does.
think the switch is off?
it will know that the switch is off. It will know that I turned it off, and it'll show the correct state in the SmartThings app or in the code, but it won't fire any of the events. So it's a hole, I think. I'm kind of surprised, and that might be a firmware thing with these guys. I'm not sure where the hole is. It might work fine with other devices.
Are the events fire? Is it WebSockets or how's it coming back into your code?
It literally calls into my web API. So this is just a web API application.
Where are you hosting it?
My house,
Oh,
my basement, the machine that I'm remote desktoped into. So, and why did I host it there? There was a legit reason.
As opposed to like cloud, or?
Well, that would be the right answer.
Yeah.
Is to, oh, I remember, because when I call in, when I call back, I don't call directly. I do for the simulator, but for the actual device itself, I don't call back to the cloud. I call to my device, to my hub that's sitting at my house. And so that's why I was running it at my home.
Because you'll have access to that via your Wi-Fi.
I could map a port and things like that, but I was already pulling my hair out with the networking as is.
There you go, already.
Yeah, that'd be fun to, throw it into a .NET Core Linux box in AWS and have it call back into the house, because what does this networking mess need more than more networking troubles?
Some virtual networks.
Yeah, there we go.
So the code that you wrote on the Samsung, your simulator there, do you publish that then into your device?
Yes, yeah. So when you write the code, the simulator is one thing you can do, but there's a publish, and there's two ways to publish it. You can publish it for me, for yourself, and then only you have access to it through the hubs that you're connected to. You can also publish it for Samsung to validate. I don't know what they do, but they'll look at it and then they'll either approve it so that it's publicly accessible. You can also, and I don't have this one hooked up to GitHub, but you can also hook up your smart apps to GitHub and publish them out there. And there's a really strong SmartThings community where you can go and look up your specific device, and people will say, yeah, there's this guy who has a GitHub project you can pull and connect to that device. And there's a lot of stuff you can find by just going to the support site for them.
When you're done refactoring, are you planning to put this up in GitHub?
I was planning on it, yeah. I was absolutely planning on it. The board that I have for my ADT/Cox Home Security, it's I'm totally blanking on the brand. It's a Vista 20P is the make and model. Hodemco. The Ademco, yeah. Honeywell Ademco Vista 20P. Totally standard. Anybody who's got a house with a security system in the last 40 years probably has one of these things, or a 15P, but it's like the standard home security, business security system for that matter. Super, super simple piece of hardware. I'm surprised that there isn't more commercial or public support for it with Samsung SmartThings, but you had a question?
Yeah, is that what you were just talking about? Is that the hub that you're talking about, or what's specific is the hub that you've got that this goes through?
So the hub that everything we've talked about so far is Samsung SmartThings. It's like an Apple TV sized box. It's about that big around, about that thick. You plug in.
It's on
Yeah, or 20 on Craigslist. Yeah. You plug it into your Ethernet. You plug in power, and then you download the app on your phone, and there's a code on there that you put into there, and it will hook it up through Samsung site. That is what gives you the capability to come in here and start writing code. Without that box, none of this works. So,
Are there any subscription fees for?
No.
any of this?
none, which also baffles me.
Yeah.
It seems like that's going to go away someday, but
Is
So-
there any resiliency in the message?
no, there's not. No, this is all fire and forget. I've seen so many messages get lost in the, and these things.
Like, glass breaking, fire the alarm. Or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
we
might
lost that one.
that might be why they're taking their time on tying in with home security, is because there is a lot of lossiness. And I mean, as you saw, the speed of these things is questionable, and yeah, there's definitely room for improvement on the resiliency side.
You still think that the smart things is kind of where it's at right now as far as the
I haven't tried out a lot of the others. I don't like smart things, actually. I think that it's very immature technology. But I think the entire industry is. I think there's a lot of competing forces in there, and I don't think the industry has resolved on what the end product is going to look like, or the end solution in a high level sense is going to look like. I really think that we'll see a whole new generation in the next couple of years. I mean, if there's 18 million Alexa and Google Home devices sold over just Christmas alone, there's clearly public demand, and people will start putting money into it, and somebody will come out. But I don't think it's going to be smart things, because there's a lot of flakiness about it. There's a lot of inconsistent capabilities. I think the ideas behind it are solid, and it's fun to play with. I think it'll be around for a while, but I don't think it's going to be the dominant player in the next few years.
I haven't seen any others with this type of programmability.
That's why I bought it twice.
Wink,
Yeah.
Wink is an alternative to this. But
Yep.
That doesn't have any of this.
It actually, I've done this kind of stuff with Wink. It's not on their site for a very good reason, and the same reason that you don't want to use this for home security. It's not mature.
Yeah. Now there are other sites out there. There's what is it? IFTTT. IFTTT, and what I use is Stringify, and these are sites that interact with different devices and give you a little bit of a richer automation set of tools. I didn't like it. I didn't like IFTTT because it was way too simplistic, and I don't like Stringify because it's way too slow, and still more simplistic than what I wanted to do. And so I use Stringify, but only for really basic stuff that I don't want to have to figure out. Like, it gives me the capability of saying when the sunset, or an hour before sunset, turn on the living room light at 5% and increase it 5% every 5 minutes. And so it gradually comes on as the sun is setting. And my wife really digs that. So, so I use it for some simple things like that. But the driving force is that Homedco, or not Homedco, Honeywell, Ademco Vista 20p integration.
Have you tried to make your own IoT device?
No, but they have official support from Samsung to run a bunch of probably all this Groovy code on is it a Raspberry Pi? I can't remember which device it is, but it's one of the small system on a chip devices, and you can then have a bunch of hardwired stuff directly into that. And that's definitely an alternative to using code to interface with the Honeywell box.
I've gone as far as the IoT device to communicate with my hub.
Yeah.
And you can set the on-off switch, but there's a depth there that you make your own IoT device. I
If you have Samsung TV, then it hooks up naturally. Which is, they have integration with their washer and dryers and refrigerators, and I mean anything Samsung, modern Samsung, all automatically hooks up to the smart things. But I don't like Samsung devices, other than my phone and the smart things box and my TV.
Would you recommend, like GE, Samsung?
You know, my number one recommendation is this AOTech. They have Z-Wave devices, and quite a few of them. They're kind of proud of their equipment. They aren't the cheapest on the market, but they are rock solid. There's only been one complaint that I've had, and it is this power strip has 6 outlets on it. All 6 are power monitored. Only 4 of them are switchable. But if I hook it up with this guy here, it only turns the whole strip on and off. I can't control the individual switches with buttons. The switches are using the individual control of switches. It's a Z-Wave channel, and it's a newer addition to the protocol, I guess. And so the on-off as a whole is the least common denominator, and the individual controls, nothing seems to support yet. So that's my one complaint I have about AOTech devices. But they have a ton of stuff. They have several different remotes, doorbell, siren, these different, all sorts of sensors. But bulbs and switches and LED strips. But they have some really good stuff. Where is the list I'm looking for? Here we go. And it's all on Amazon. They don't sell them through their own website. These guys are little window sensors, absolutely tiny. Smallest one I've seen. The bulbs are $60, just like Philips and all that. But they have these really cool sensors that motion, temperature, light, humidity, and vibration, just in case you want to know if your house is undergoing an earthquake right now. Ultraviolet.
Or if the cloud.
Or but yeah, there's a lot of good stuff with there. But I've got some GE switches. I'm trying to remember, they go by another name too, or they're cross-marketed with another brand. They're the exact same switch, just different name on it. And they work just fine. They handle more amperage than most of them. Most of them are 15 amp, and those are 20 amp, the GE ones. And then one of them has a dimmer built in, which is usually extra. And so I like them, but they don't connect, and it's hard to associate them to your hub and disassociate them. And if you're not careful about how you do that, you can end up with a $50 brick. Usually you can find a way to do a hard reset on them, but nobody talks about it on their websites. And the GE devices were really, really hard to figure out how to hard reset them. But they were good. Linear is the garage door openers I have, and I absolutely love those. It's silly, but I really like to be able to come in here. Probably shouldn't be showing my home stuff to this crowd. Everybody's gonna be, what's your IP address? But so I have my garage here. Oh, I'm not showing you yet. So this is my home hub, and you can see that I have both my garage doors are closed right now. I have a separate thermostat in my garage because I got a little heater in there for poker nights. So I can come in here and can turn on the camera. And you can see that I'm not there, my wife's car is. And then I can go in and freak my wife out and say, open the garage door. And then you can go.
What cameras are you using?
And then, as you can see, the garage door is opening there. And when you open and close the garage doors, the device that it has this super bright LED in there. And so for 30 seconds before it opens, it flashes this light and it goes, weep, weep, weep. And so my wife probably is kind of freaking out right now.
What cameras are you using?
I am using garbage cameras.
I thought it said garage.
What's that? Oh. They are what Cox had probably 5 years ago with their system. I wish I remember the brand on it, but they are really flaky. By default, they're absolutely locked down and hooked into Cox's system, and I had to do a lot of searching and looking through Chinese documentation to try and figure out how to reset them and get into the cameras. So they don't record, they don't do motion detection, nothing that a modern camera was. I think Matt's got a really good camera system that he might be able to recommend.
Yeah, Amcrest has some good cameras.
Amcrest. And they have recording and motion detection and all that.
Yeah, I don't know if it would integrate with this system or not.
I'm sure there's a way.
Yeah, probably.
So, with all of this, saving hardware for a different conversation, what was the biggest learning curve for you with the Samsung stuff?
The biggest learning curve, surprisingly, is, so as I said, I inherited a lot of the equipment from buying a house, right? And just had a pile of junk in a box. So I have a random Zigbee device, the garage door opener, and getting that to hook up to the Samsung SmartThings. Well, the garage door opener was a challenge on its own because it took a special smart app to interact with it, community supported one. But even the GE switches we were talking about, they were previously associated with whatever it was that Cox had. And so for me to associate that with the Samsung SmartThings device, I had to disassociate it from whatever Cox had. Well, I don't have that device. So I had to find out how to hard reset it. And figuring out without, I had nothing to go on, and finding information on the web is pretty sparse. There's a lot of stuff, consumer level stuff, but there's not a lot of technical and troubleshooting stuff out there. So that was probably the biggest, most painful learning curve, is just figuring out how to get things hooked up in the first place. The Samsung SmartThings app does not have any way to back up and restore backups. So I've got a boatload of different devices on there. And at one point I did something and they were all gone. And so I had to start over. I had to rebuild my automation scripts, everything. So that's the second learning curve, is be careful.
I have a similar story in that mine would be the association process.
Yeah.
It's not straightforward in that, oh, if you mess this up, you just do this. It's literally, it was supposed to work. Why doesn't it work? And it's not going to tell you like the lights, right? All they do is blink.
Yep.
If they're not associated, you have to wait like 5 to 8 minutes to find out, because your light will go whoop,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's all it will do. You'll go to the app and you'll hit the button and it's not working, and you realize that it's not associated, so that didn't do anything anyway.
So in the, for instance, the linear garage door opener, to reset that to factory, I couldn't find documentation on it anywhere. And so I just started pushing buttons and started just playing with it, because I'd learned several other devices, and some of them you hold the button for 20 seconds, some of them you push the button 3 times. There's different handshakes to reset different devices. And I learned through trial and error that you have to push the button 4 times and then hold it on the 5th time for 5 seconds, and then it will factory reset. So I got stupid lucky that I was able to even figure that out. Yeah. Well, and a lot of these devices, you can't find. They're not consumer level devices. They're made for the Coxes and the ADTs to integrate in with their systems, and so it's just not publicly accessible.
Broker placement situation.
Yeah.
Linear is Z-Wave, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was Zigbee for sure. Maybe it's Zigbee for the sensor to the device.
Could be
I don't remember.
The device protocol?
It's the communication protocol. Yeah, they have a mesh network to pass the signal from device to device, and I didn't dig into it too much, so I don't know a whole lot about it. But it's how they communicate with each other. Different frequencies too. All right, any more? When am I supposed to stop talking?
You can talk to 7:30 if you want.
I'll be quick. So,
For this today, that's awesome.
cool. This is my starting point for the home security, and again, even if I could demo this, I wouldn't, because if I screw it up, my alarm's going off, and I'm a little far away from fixing that. My dog hates the alarm, by the way. But this is kind of the idea of what, and this is really scattered, I know, but this is kind of the idea. I want to register the Honeywell Vista just like I do the SmartThings hub, and then pull out the devices and come up with a bridge between the SmartThings and the Honeywell. The device, the Honeywell device, it's the metal box on the wall. I'm sure you guys have all seen it. You open that up and it's got this big bundle of wires that are coming in, and it's literally contact switches and normally open, normally closed circuits that just form a loop, and they're resistor terminated. They're supposed to be resistor terminated at the far end, but they resistor terminate them in the box in every instance I've seen, because people are lazy. And so the board itself can sense whether the signal, whether it's opened or closed, or if a wire's been cut, or various different circumstances. But there's no USB port. You can't just plug into it and get the information from there. The only thing that you can get out of there is through the keypads, and the keypads are basically your root terminal into this Honeywell Vista box. But the thing is, all the information, everything that goes on in the system, is communicated to these terminals. So there's a device, I think I linked it somewhere. Yeah, there's a device, alarmdecoder.com, called AD2USB, and the keypads all hook up with 4 wires, and so this thing has 4 wires, and you plug it into your circuit board here, and it pretends to be a keypad, and then it converts every signal that it receives to USB, and then you just literally log into it with a terminal or open up a COM port in your application, and so then you can communicate to your security system through the computer. That's the reason. That's why I'm running it on my local machine. Totally forgot about that. Because
Do you have any expectation of being able to work with a monitoring service company?
that's what I'm trying to avoid. This whole problem goes away. This problem all goes away if I pay $50 a month and have ADT, because they'll come and
Well, I understand. But,
Yeah.
But we have an older system in our house, and it's not currently active.
Mhm.
But it was connected to the fire department's
Mhm.
signaling company, not through that central office. If my house starts to burn down and nobody's
Yeah.
home, would I have been better to spend the $50? I don't know.
Yeah.
But you could just have it text you, right?
Sure.
You can call the fire department.
Yeah, and that's what I plan on
So
on
you
doing.
become the monitoring.
Yeah, I get
individual
texts when my
household.
garage door is open too long. That's the only thing I actually get text for right now. But once I get the security system hooked into there, I plan on getting texts when doors open, when I'm set in the secure mode, and the sump pump goes.
You do have dependency on internet access because it's part of this cloud-based.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So if your Cox system and its Cox internet goes down,
Yeah, there is a standard phone line, and the home security system can tap into that phone line, and there's actually a cell box that you can get, and it can call out, and you can get a phone call from your box too, and you can do that without monitoring, just without paying the monitoring.
You left your garage door open.
Oh, is that what it was? Seriously?
It didn't close.
There you go. It's been 10 minutes.
One thing that I don't know if you mentioned as well, so I found this, if you do have old systems, they have tie-ins.
If you do have what?
Old window monitor thingies, they have, all you do is take the wires, plug it into this new box, and it's fully compatible with these smart boxes. So you don't have to replace all of your hardware.
So how many new devices did you have to buy for this all to connect? Like your sump pumps, were they already Wi-Fi or whatever enabled?
They aren't. They are hooked to the security system. So the
So they're wired?
the sump pumps have, yeah, they're wired. The sump pumps have a main float, and then they have an overflow, and those go to a control box, and the control box automatically it has a normally open, normally closed connector on there, and I ran a hard wire from the security system box to that, and now when they trigger, it will give me a security alert. And you can program the security system to handle that in a variety of different ways. And in mine, it just dings like it does when there's motion.
About I noticed you had the fire alarm.
Yeah, that was part of the security system that was there. So, as far as what I started with the Samsung box. And then I used stuff that was at the house when I bought it. If you were starting from scratch, I would suggest getting a switch outlet and just playing with that. And so your startup investment becomes minimal. The switches are the most useful thing because you can do a lot of different things with it. Turn on your light at 6, turn it off when you go to bed, and you start to go, oh, it'd be cool if I had this, if I had that. We've got motion detectors with the security system. I could literally, if I get this hooked up to interacting back and forth, I could literally have the lights come on and off as we walk through the room, which, every business has, but it's kind of nice to be able to do that yourself, I think.
Did you know, is anybody trying to standardize the communication between all these devices and everything? I know there's obviously
I hope
is there
so.
incentive? I mean, they want to lock in, but
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, what's TCP/IP, what's HTTP? I mean, why? I'm gonna have my own.
The only standardization I've seen is, X10 is dead. Power running these signals over your power lines is dead. But the only standardization I've seen is it's basically boiling down to 3 or 4 technologies. It's Wi-Fi, Z-Wave, Zigbee, maybe Bluetooth. Bluetooth, actually, I shouldn't even say maybe. There's a lot of Bluetooth, the low power Bluetooth that's coming out right now. But that's the only standardization I've seen. And
Even at like the protocol level where it's, in the messaging and
the
all that.
so the capabilities that we're seeing in Samsung's SmartThings are very similar to the capabilities that you see when you look at the Z-Wave protocol. Not one-to-one. They're not the same, no. But there's definitely a spirit to what they're shooting for that parallels each other. And I haven't looked at.
All this converge.
Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great because then you could stop talking about these immature technologies and you can see somebody come out with something really solid. But I think that's the barrier right now is since there are so many technologies that are competing with each other,
Everybody's trying to win.
it's a big investment.
Market share.
Yeah.
I think you do also see in the market right now, anybody who wants to be a part of that home automation group, you see APIs, even if they're just like 2 calls. You see an API out there, RESTful API some of Wink's protocols before I actually moved off of them were like I'd call it, I wouldn't get any response. It would just sit there and time out, and I don't know what that's like anymore. But yeah, just be mindful that if you're not buying something that everybody else is buying, you're probably going to run into stuff like that.
I can say, and it's probably with Wink too, but from what I've seen, both on the device side and on the Samsung Hub side, firmware updates are so frequent. Even tonight when I was trying to get these things working here, I realized that 2 of them were out of date, and it wasn't just 1.2.1 to 1.2.3. It was a 1.2.1 to 1.5, and they increment constantly. And I haven't even had, I got them at Christmas. There's constant updates to the firmware and to the hub and the app. So there's a lot of development effort going into making it more resilient, giving it new functionality.
But also, it can wipe out your entire hub if you're not careful.
Yep. Yep. All right, anything else? Cool, calling it. Thanks.
Just a few things to do before we wrap up here. First of all, thanks, Eric, for the presentation. I appreciate it.
You bet.
We get to do this every January.